Star Trek Picard, Season 3, Episode 10, The Last Generation.
The last episode, too.
We start out this episode with a message going out to Starfleet from President Anton Chekhov, who I only assume is a direct descendant of Pavel Chekhov. So we start out basically with an Easter egg. The Borg-controlled fleet is attacking Earth. Riker is asking, where the hell's the cavalry? Data said, we are the cavalry. The fleet is being controlled by the collective, a hive mind with a single voice. What they're doing here is exposition. In just about every scene in this episode, they narrate what's going on in the episode while we're watching the scene.
Or what happened before in the previous episode, which is going to be weird for the people who are seeing the IMAX movie, in quotation marks, which is episode 9 and episode 10 squished together. That's going to be weird halfway through the movie, getting exposition about stuff they just watched in the first hour.
I can only imagine, if you're using the audio description, how it's just going to be mimicking what the character just said. That probably is a bitch to listen to, because you're just listening to the same thing over and over and over again. This was weird. Deanna says if Space Dock falls, there will be nothing standing between an assimilated fleet and Earth. And Beverly says if Earth falls, everything falls. Every planet, every system. Data says that he's picking up on long-range sensors. They have found a Borg vessel near Jupiter, so Picard lays in a course for Jupiter. They go to Jupiter. Hiding in the red eye is a Borg cube. Allegedly, there's a transwarp conduit there. But my question is, how long has this Borg cube been sitting there in the red eye on Jupiter? They have red eyes all over.
Jack had red eyes. I don't know if this is just a coincidence or not, but it doesn't matter.
It may not have been a conscious thing. They may have just subconsciously been obsessed with red eyes. Anyway, it's broadcasting the collective, and it's Jack's voice.
The color red seems to be used throughout this entire season and throughout all of New Trek, going back to J.J. Trek's movies.
And they're obsessed with eyes, often ripping out eyes.
This might be a coincidence that the eye of Jupiter, which just happens to be red, is along the same line as everything else. When we get into analysis, I want to talk a little bit about stringing together things to show there's a pattern, because I think that I need to explain myself a little bit better, especially after the videos we released this week and some of the conversations that I got dragged into. And I just want to address that later.
The Borg cube apparently has an amplifier that is sending this signal to the now assimilated fleet. And the only way to stop it is to sever the connection. And Picard says, what began over 35 years ago ends tonight. Meanwhile, back on the Titan, Seven, Rafi, and some other older members of the crew take back the ship with the portable Beam Me Up, which apparently is a transporter attached to a phaser. They trap the bridge crew in the transporter room, the assimilated bridge crew. The cook, Seven's telling him to take his position on the bridge. He's telling her how he didn't complete his lunar flight class training for all these reasons. You know, I think he said something about his mom getting sick and his brother having a hernia, so he had to run some deli. This guy looked like he was half Packled. It was supposed to be comic relief, I guess, but it felt like they were trying to mimic the Orville, and it just felt really out of place.
His dialogue, they were trying to make this humorous, and it felt so out of place, given what was happening around the situation. There's a time for humor and a time for not. I understand the Orville, they mix in that this is the inappropriate time to put the humor in there. But for Starfleet to throw in lines like that while there's an intense situation, assuming I'm taking this story seriously, which I'm not, but assuming I was, that's inappropriate to do that in that situation. It's one of those, if you're not going to take the material seriously, why should we, the viewer?
Seven tells this guy he's the pilot, he's got this, so he should take his station. They managed to disconnect the ship from that fleet formation crap by using the cloak, because fleet formation control is through line of sight, and if they can't be seen, they can't be controlled.
How does that work?
It was stupid. It was really, really stupid. It was a way to just bring the cloak back in.
Were they able to have control of any real systems on that ship? Because earlier, in the last episode, their communications was severed when fleet formation kicked in, but I guess they have control of the cloak. And then cloaking your ship gets rid of this line of sight thing. Like, line of sight from what? From just other ships?
Yeah.
How does that work? I don't understand.
It was stupid.
To me, it's like, if you have a ship with no shields, and it's cloaked, and you shoot a phaser at this blank area, but that's where the ship is still going to get hit with the weapon. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean the weapon doesn't hit it. So what I don't understand is, how does this line of sight work? Are they targeting every other ship that's out there and sending a tight beam control thing out to that?
Must be.
So when they're cloaked, they can't find the ship to do a tight beam target lock, I guess?
Yeah, that has to be it. Back at the Borg cube, the cube is only 36% operational because the majority of the resources are being used to broadcast the hive mind. Deanna's never felt anything like this before. It's like quiet suffering. Data looks at the cube and says, so much pain, so much misery inflicted on so many. I hate them. Because we have to keep reinforcing that Data has feelings now. Deanna says Jack is there, but he's totally consumed by the collective. Worf asks, what if he's too far gone? I think it was Picard who said Jack is in there and he's still Jack. Like, based on what? I don't even know. So, millions of people are about to be killed, but you're going to let them die so you can save your son. Okie dokie. That just makes no sense to me. The cube scans them and lowers its shield. Picard says, it's an invitation. Somewhere on that cube is a beacon projecting across the solar system, yada yada yada. Our objective is clear, locate it and destroy it. Sever the connection to the assimilated fleet. And Geordi says, locating the beacon is going to be tough because it's so powerful, it's scrambling the sensor arrays. The only way to find it is to beam down and to access the systems directly. And of course they'll have to find Jack too. Picard tells Beverly he's going to bring Jack home. And Riker's going to. And Worf says he's going to make it a threesome. And Riker asks Worf if he even hears himself. And that was really kind of...
That was a sexual innuendo type joke thing, which on the Orville, maybe that's funny. Now entering glory hole with the Bortus episode. But on Star Trek, this shouldn't even be in there, in this situation. I don't know. I'm trying to go along with what they're setting up there and take it seriously, and they throw this crap in there. And I like the Orville. I like all 3 seasons of the Orville. But Star Trek is not the Orville. There's a time for humor and a time not for humor. And breaking up a scene like this, whatever tension you're trying to set up, you just wrecked it.
Mm-hmm. Picard, Worf, and Riker beam onto the cube, or into the cube, or however the hell you want to talk about this. Riker says, it's too quiet. There's a bunch of dead Borg. The necrotic tissue is being cannibalized. Shouldn't, one of the first things they say once they get down there is, holy shit, this smells bad? It smells like death in here? That would stink, all of those rotting corpses. They call it a tomb. It should smell like one. Why aren't you describing what this smells like? As a writer, that's one of the things you're supposed to do. Tell people what it smells like. But they didn't. They just ignored the fact that it's all rotting flesh in there, and it probably stinks to high heaven. They have more Captain Obvious dialogue, and then they split up. Picard goes to look for Jack. Worf and Riker go to look for the beacon interface thingy. There's some more horrible dialogue. Picard says he's no longer their captain. He has to be a father now. Somehow, Picard has knowledge of where things are located in the cube. Some part of him is still compatible with the hive. In my opinion, it would have just made more sense if he was relying on his memories from his time as Locutus, instead of saying that he's still compatible with the hive. Again, that goes back to, isn't he a security risk if he's still hearing the collective in his head?
Any time after Best of Both Worlds ended, it just makes you wonder the decisions Picard made, and was he being influenced? I don't know a nice way to put that, because I know defenders of this will go in and rush in and say, No, you don't understand. Remember, his DNA was what was in those transporters, so of course he's going to pick on... I don't care. I really don't care. I agree with Molly. It would have been better to say, but these cubes are laid out pretty much the same as when I was there. I think I know where Jack might be.
Or, here's the thought, he recognizes this particular cube. Because we'll find out in a second why. Picard goes off, he finds Jack, he's horrified to find the Borg Queen too, so there you go. Jack is all hooked up like the kid on the O'Malus ripoff episode of Strange New Worlds, or the lady in the Satellite 5 episode of Doctor Who. The Borg Queen looks like a cross between Snoke from Star Wars and the Queen of the Rachnos from Doctor Who. It looks like those two entities had a baby, and that gave you the Borg Queen.
She was speaking so over the top, like the Arachnos Queen. I don't know if you're familiar with that episode, viewer, but that character was just speaking so over the top, and I guess it was a bit of cheese in there, actually quite a bit of cheese. I don't remember the Borg Queen being that over the top, and maybe with Ag Borg, but before Ag Borg, I don't remember them. I mean, I don't even care for the Borg Queen idea. I dismiss that idea as garbage anyway, going back to First Contact and going through Voyager. But if I'm forced to accept that idea, I don't remember her being that over the top. I mean, maybe in a death scene or something, but not when she's just talking to people. I don't remember that. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but this was so over the top.
She laughs and tells Locutus he's home and has returned to his true family and to her. Meanwhile, back on the Titan, they see NCC-1701D show up on their scanner, and it's near a Borg cube. We get more exposition explaining the situation. Seven states that it's Picard, and they must be engaging the Borg. Picard and company are making a play to shut down the collective system, and they have to buy them time. Seven and Rafi and everybody on the Titan, they're going to take on the assimilated fleet.
With their cloaked ship.
The Borg Queen tells Picard she's given Jack the self-assurance of a mother's love, and he goes all mentally irregular and starts shooting at her while yelling, "You are not his mother," which of course has no effect because, well, shooting at the Borg Queen, what do you think is going to happen? We've seen this over and over and over again. The phaser fire doesn't get to her. That was a waste. Picard tells the Queen to let Jack go and to take him instead. She tells him no, because the future of the Borg isn't assimilation, it's evolution. Worf and Riker find the access node and give the Enterprise the beacon's info. This wakes up the local Borg drones, and there's a fight. Worf is fighting them with his bat'leth. He gets hit by phaser fire from the Borg drones. So he's injured. Riker tries to lift his bat'leth. It's very heavy.
Is it a bat'leth or a sword? I didn't see the shape of it.
Oh, I thought it was a bat'leth.
I don't know.
It was so dark in there, I couldn't really see what was going on.
I just assumed it was a sword.
Was it a sword?
But maybe I'm wrong. I mean,
it must have been a sword.
I don't want to die on that hill.
No, it must have been a sword. Because inside this sword was a hidden phaser. Riker asks Worf, was this in there the whole time? Why the hell didn't you use it? Worf said because swords are fun.
That reminded me, Roger Rabbit. You mean you could have taken these handcuffs off at any time? Not at any time, only when it was funny. That's what this reminded me of.
Me too. I actually wrote it here in my notes.
This is another one of those inappropriate times. They're trying to set up a dramatic thing, and they inject humor. And a defender's going to say, no, the humor there is just trying to contrast with the drama. But it doesn't. It wrecks it. I'm trying really hard with the ridiculous dialogue going on to invest myself and suspend disbelief. And when you take time out to make a joke like that, all it's doing is hitting the eject button on my suspension of disbelief. There are no stakes here. They're making jokes. There are no stakes here.
We get more exposition. Picard says to the Borg Queen, "You struck a deal with Vatic and her changelings." So the talking hand must have been the Borg Queen's ugly disfigured face. How that worked, I don't know, but whatever. The Borg Queen says to Picard, they weaponized the human's biology, saying to Picard, "Your biology," as if he's still human. That this is payback for the bioweapons the humans used on the changelings and the Borg. The Borg are going to propagate forever instead of doing the assimilation route. And the Borg will be born for a single purpose, not to assimilate, but to annihilate all. What is the point of that? And how is that even remotely related to what the Borg were like before seeking perfection?
Well, I thought that, again, people correct me in the comments, but I thought the Borg's whole purpose was to find species, assimilate the pieces that they actually thought moved them forward on their road to perfection. And I thought technology was the road to perfection because evolution is very, 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 very slow. And I thought they kind of had a distaste for biologicals. That's why I thought they went the technological route. But again, maybe I'm wrong. This whole time talking about evolution, they had the changelings that we're talking about. They were evolved. And now you've got these new Borg that are evolving, but they're not doing it through technology. Like, I just thought the Borg were all about technology and assimilating pieces, assimilating biological species, and grabbing the strengths of that species, but evolving with technology, those nanites, to move them forward. And now they're giving in and saying, well, no, the biological route was always the right way to go.
And we're not seeking perfection anymore. We just want to destroy everything. I guess some people are probably going to say, oh, well, after being trapped in that cube by herself, all of her Borg drones dying, she's insane now and she just wants to destroy everything. Oh, okay, fine. Meanwhile, back on the Titan, the Borglings get loose from the transporter room, and Geordi's daughters go and destroy the Titan's cloak. The cube is now attacking the Enterprise. Geordi didn't have time to complete work on the weapon systems, so Dr. Crusher is going to have to do it manually. She has no problem doing this, and then explains that a lot has happened in the last 20 years.
Dr. Crusher's a killing machine now. She is a mean, lean killing machine.
The beacon is at the heart of the cube. The route to take to get there looks like that pipe screensaver from Windows, if anybody used to have that. And in order to reach it, they're going to have to fly the Enterprise into the Borg cube to destroy this beacon at the center. Which kind of reminds me a lot of Return of the Jedi, when Lando Calrissian had to fly the Millennium Falcon into the Death Star to destroy it. Geordi says it's impossible. Not even his daughter could do it. And Data says, I have a gut feeling that I can do it. Here goes nothing. Deanna says, hey, why am I sensing enjoyment?
Another joke there. It's another joke at a wrong time. This is supposed to be a moment of Data because somehow now he is able to have emotions, that somehow this joke was worthwhile taking away from that moment of Data having confidence. There was no logical reason to think he could actually do this. He just felt he could. So that by itself should have been on its own. Deanna making that joke took me right out of that scene again.
Well, this feels like it was written for middle schoolers with all of the exposition to explain what was going on. Really stupid ones at that. Anyway, they managed to get to the heart of the cube just fine. But as soon as they blow up the beacon, apparently the entire cube will be destroyed. So there's going to be like 1 minute after they shoot that thing for everybody to get the hell out. The fleet destroys the space dock. So there's nothing standing between the assimilated fleet and Earth now.
How does that work, by the way? Again, I'm not trying to say I have I found a logical gap in what they're doing. I'm just asking the viewer here. They've got that, what they call a space dock. It's on one side of the planet. Can't the ships just go around to the other side and invade the planet that way? What am I missing? Is that space dock putting, I think they mentioned something about a global shield or something, so maybe that space dock was generating the global shield?
Maybe.
But if it was, isn't that a horrible choke point to have just one point of failure for that shield to go down? Because I was joking as I was watching it, like, why don't they just go to the backside of the planet and just invade that way?
Don't forget, this is the same Starfleet that had their entire fleet right there in one spot.
Still do.
Yeah, look how that turned out. The fleet starts targeting major cities, but I guess they didn't fire on them, they just sat there with them targeted, because that makes sense. Picard is unplugging Jack, and the Borg Queen tells Picard that he'll kill him because his body won't survive the shock of just being unplugged. Jack has to choose to leave. Geordi tells Riker to prepare to beam up, but Riker and Worf choose to stay and go to help Picard. They'll have 1 minute to get out after the Enterprise fires on the beacon. Picard says he's been running from the Collective for half his life. Now he has something to go back for. And he plugs himself in for assimilation, which I'm not sure how that worked exactly with his synthetic body, but whatever.
That would have been interesting, is when he plugged himself in, if somehow something different happened, because this is Robo-Picard. It would be interesting is like when Data, used to plug himself into stuff, if somehow he would have more ability to manipulate the Borg stuff than a normal human would. I was waiting for that to happen, but no, they forgot he's Robo-Picard.
He's now in the Matrix with Jack. Jack is going on and on about how great it is in there, without suffering or loneliness or fear, and how it's perfect.
You mean like the Nexus and Generations?
Picard is telling Jack how he understands that Jack has always felt different, hungry to connect, but keeping people distant, so they never saw the real Jack. And Picard was the same. Picard joined Starfleet to find a family, and he found it. He let them in, but there was always a barrier. He felt there was something wrong with him. And then I don't know if I missed a line or something, but then he said something about he waited in that vineyard to die alone. And Jack is the part of him that he never knew was missing. And Jack insists that the Matrix is where he belongs and he's gonna stay there.
Like the Nexus. This whole inside, I realize there's a little bit inside Voyager. You've got like the Unimatrix stuff, and I get that there's a Star Trek backing of this, at least on some level. But when I think of this whole, I don't want to leave, I'm happy here, that just reminded me of the film Generations and the Nexus. That's what it reminded me of. I don't know, maybe that was just me. I'm looking for every little thing that might be borrowed, which this thing had a ton borrowed from all over. Maybe that's not even a valid argument to make. Did anybody else feel that was very Generations-like Nexus when he was talking to Picard about being happy and not wanting to leave?
Time's up. Geordi and company fire torpedoes at the beacon. Picard says to Jack, "If you won't leave, then I'll stay with you until the end." And he hugs Jack. And he tells Jack, "You have changed my life forever." Which is interesting because he didn't meet Jack till after he was dead. But okie dokie then. And we see a montage of the 5 minutes that Picard actually knew Jack.
In narrative for this season, how long has season 3 lasted? A month? A couple of weeks? I got the impression this was maybe 2 weeks of time. And I'm not trying to trivialize bonding between people, but you see so many stories about when adopted people, when they eventually find their natural parents, and it takes a while to form a bond between those people because that's not who they grew up with. To me, I don't understand. It's not that I don't think there should be something here. Picard would have had the potential of a son if this wasn't Robo-Picard. But if I'm pretending this is Picard just for a quick moment, he didn't get to know Jack long enough to form any father-son relationship. Not any more than if an adopted child finds their natural parents. That takes time to build.
Jack and Picard are hugging. Jack's crying all over the place, and he chooses to leave. The Borg Queen says to Jack that without her, he is going to be broken and alone. And Jack says, "I'm not alone." Deanna can detect Riker, because Riker reached out to her telepathically because he was about to die. She's able to locate him. And that's when they all get beamed back up to the Enterprise. And they shoot out of the cube like the Millennium Falcon, shooting right out of that Death Star right before the big thing blows up.
So you think this is the end of the episode, right? Nope, there's 20 more minutes to go.
Meanwhile, back on the Titan, the turbolift doors open onto the bridge. The Borglings step out with their phasers aimed at Seven and company, and they have their phasers aimed right back at them. And then all of a sudden they start to unassimilate, and you know this because the black crap that's on their faces starts to recede. This is just in time, and they're all standing there horrified with the phasers in their hands, and Sydney LaForge starts crying, and Seven gives her a big hug. And the rest of the former Borglings are now just standing there looking at each other. I don't know how the signal stopping made them unassimilate. I would have thought that a DNA change like that would have just been permanent.
Like once activated, you're activated. Or even if let's just pretend, whatever signal's gone to activate them, they're deactivated. The molding and stuff on their faces, wouldn't that have taken days, weeks, months, or maybe even surgery to get rid of that stuff.
One would have thought. But it just magically disappears. Back on the Enterprise, Beverly gives Jack a big hug. Riker and Deanna hug. Geordi and Data fist bump. Worf sits down and falls asleep.
And they played that like an old grandfather on the lazy boy chair, where
he was snoring.
He was sitting there snoring, and then like Deanna was like, look, look, look. And Worf was just... Well, actually, it might not have been Deanna. I forget who it was. But somebody said, look, look, look. And Worf was just sitting there like an old grandfather snoring in that chair. I don't even know what to say. That's the great warrior Worf. And he fell asleep on the chair. And people are going to try to explain to me that that's the whole point why it's funny. Because after all that work, he had to take a break and rest. And he would never do that. Somehow the irony's funny. Whatever.
Next thing we get is Riker's captain's log. Stardate, shall we say, 1. And he relays to us that Starfleet has implemented a transporter solution to purge the Borg DNA, which I was questioning, why didn't Data do that the second that they saw that there was Borg DNA that had been placed in the transporters, so that they could have used that as a weapon against the assimilated Borg immediately, but whatever.
When Seven had her transport gun, that might have been interesting if Data was able to have reconfigured that ridiculous remade transporter that has that common pattern crap, but you got to go along with their stupid way of doing it. If Data would have changed that, and Seven would have said something like, yeah, the transporters are changed, now we just have to get these people through there to cure them, that would have been more interesting than what they ended up doing in the first place here. With their, well, whatever, just continue.
The transporter solution was developed by the new head of Starfleet Medical, Admiral Beverly Crusher. She also spearheaded technology that privately scans for changelings.
What does that mean, by the way? Privately scans? What does that mean?
They were secretly doing this to people as they were being transported.
So Starfleet, yet again, is doing some covert stuff without telling its citizens.
Yeah.
That's nice.
The changelings kept but didn't kill many of their targets, which means Tuvok is still alive. And this next scene I really didn't like because back in the day when it first aired, I actually watched Voyager. This scene between Seven and Tuvok was cold. It felt like these two people were strangers, not people who had served on Voyager together for years, isolated from everyone else in Starfleet. It would have been an experience that they shared. You know, former Borg and Vulcan, it doesn't matter. There should have been more familiarity there between the two, and it felt like they didn't know each other, like, at all. Seven was about to quit because, you know, the whole mutiny thing. However, the command crew of the Enterprise, as well as Seven and everybody else, they got a full pardon. So that's that.
We got to see some holographic crew recommendation from Shaw.
Yeah, apparently he had submitted his evaluation of Seven before the mutiny took place, and he actually recommended her for a captain's chair. She gets all choked up listening to his review of her, which just seemed out of place. The Shaw character was very poorly conceived and executed, in my opinion. Not by the actor, but by the writing staff. And this just made no sense whatsoever. So Seven, instead of resigning, is going to be a captain now.
She's going to be a captain after how many months, years of service? Because at the beginning of the series, in episode 1, she was a commander on the Titan. And I was asking you, well, I thought Starfleet before that, they outlawed Borg from being in Starfleet. That was like a throwaway line from season 2. So somehow she was put into a commander's rank, I guess because all that time on Voyager, she got like AP placement credits. So she's a commander. Now she's going to be a captain? This is like Michael Burnham level. I'm not sure Seven is yet qualified to be a captain of a starship. It just reminds me of the Michael Burnham, you're just such a super genius, you don't have to go through the... Michael Burnham didn't go to Starfleet Academy. We have a video on that. I don't believe she did. I don't think Seven went to Starfleet Academy. How can you give somebody a captain's rank in control of a ship? A ship's captain is a very powerful position because you are essentially a dictator on that ship. If you don't go through Starfleet Academy, How are you qualified to be captain of a ship?
Well, I know some people were doing correspondence courses back on Voyager, but I don't remember if she was one of them.
You can't be a captain by going through an online course. I don't believe you can be a captain because you have to deal with people. People. Leadership is dealing with people. And you can't do that online. You cannot take... It would be like trying to become a clinical psychologist by doing it all online. You can't do that. Being a leader, you can't do that online. You can get some of the prerequisites out of the way. Now, that's not to say I think Seven, her character, was immensely talented, and I believe one day she could have been a commander or a captain, but she would need to be in Starfleet for like 10 years and have gone through Starfleet Academy. Even Data went through Starfleet Academy.
Well, those Borglings killed off so many of the captains, they can't afford to lose her at this point.
That's just more of the suspension of disbelief that I struggle. I try really hard. I'm sitting there grunting down, trying to keep the suspension of disbelief going. And between the jokes, some of the weird techno babble, which they had this too, they got the words right, but the context I question. And then stuff like this where Seven's going to be a captain of a starship. My suspension of disbelief hat blew off my head and went out the window, and it's gone now.
Worf leaked Rafi's involvement to the press. So now her son forgives her, and she can see her granddaughter, which, again, Data appears to be seeing Deanna for counseling every day. Meanwhile, she's looking at vacation spots on her phone while he's talking.
That's a great counselor. If I was going to go to any counselor, it would not be Deanna Troi. She is the Dr. Nick of counselors. I just would not go to her. She seems incompetent.
And then we skip to 1 year later. Riker, Picard, and Geordi turn out the lights on the Enterprise. And Riker comments that he misses that voice, the computer's voice, which is Majel Barrett. Which, I agree, we all miss that voice.
Yeah, there was some dialogue pieces like that on that bridge where I actually felt it was so close to being good stuff.
The next scene is Admirals Picard and Crusher with Jack in a shuttle. Jack is wearing a Starfleet uniform for real now because he's now an ensign. And
1 year later, is he not going through Starfleet Academy either?
He got accelerated.
But not even a first year? Even if you go, you still should have to attend like a year or two. Maybe he did. It is possible that 1 year later he was in Starfleet Academy. It is possible. But I assumed, wasn't Starfleet Academy like a bachelor program is now? Or it's a 4-year program? So even if it was accelerated, shouldn't he be in Starfleet Academy for 2 years?
Well, it sounds like he tested out of a lot of things. They said he speaks 13 alien languages, as well as having all of these other skills.
So did Data go through Starfleet Academy in 1 year?
I don't know.
I mean, I don't think they ever mentioned that. I know it's a nitpick, and maybe it's not even worth fighting for this. With everything else that accumulated in this series, does Starfleet Academy even exist anymore? It doesn't seem like it even matters anymore.
Well, it must exist because they're going to make a show about it.
They'll have like 5 students because nobody attends Starfleet Academy. They just somehow get fast-tracked online and go on starships.
As a surprise, the Titan has been rechristened to be the Enterprise G. Beverly and Jean-Luc look very cozy. So are they back together? And where the hell is Laris?
Yeah, wasn't he supposed to move with Laris somewhere at the beginning of the season?
Yeah.
Did they forget about Laris? Laris actually was a character I didn't mind. Why would you do that to that character? I realize that character is a legacy character from this Picard series, but that character doesn't deserve some finale of Picard talking to her and saying, I realize that this relationship isn't going to work, blah, blah, blah. They just spit on the Laris character.
Why the hell would he get back together with Beverly after she just hid his son from him for the last 20 years?
I guess he's turned on by a murder machine. Well, he's a machine anyway, right? Robo-Picard, so a murder machine, he's like, yeah!
Oh, God. Seven is captain of the Enterprise G. Rafi is her number 1. Sidney LaForge is still there, and now Jack is 2. And this appears to be a setup for a next Next Generation show, a thief, a pirate, and a spy with their own ship. A bunch of ne'er-do-wells and rule breakers. What could possibly go wrong?
They actually said that, by the way. I guess that's supposed to be a joke because all of us are saying the exact same line, and they're just kind of spitting in your face by saying that line.
And they're supposed to be going to the Metalis system, and they're waiting for Seven to say her thing.
Strange New Worlds. It's so amazing that trailer came out the day before this garbage, and they brought up that same thing. Ortega's told Spock he had to do that thing.
Yeah. Everybody has their thing, either engage or make it so, or what's yours gonna be? We don't get to find out. So I guess...
That's better than Spock's. Spock's was, make it go. We look for things to make our ship go.
Then we're in Guinan's bar with the old Enterprise gang. They're all drinking and talking and playing cards. And then at the very end, we see Jack in his quarters, and who shows up but Q. And now Jack's trial is beginning. And I just have to say, if Q was going to be in this season, why didn't you start out by giving Picard his damn body back? Oh, except that they were using that to extract the DNA so that they could have their whole stupid story. This was awful.
This was more nonsense. At the end when they were playing poker, that was a recreation, sort of the ending scene in All Good Things. Given that the last scene at that table was the same as All Good Things, why did we need this series? Why? We already had that same send-off of them sitting at the table playing poker together. Why do we need it again? I guess some people would say, no, this time it wasn't the regret of Picard just sitting there going, I wish I would have done this years ago. Now I am. I don't know. It's just, to me, it didn't matter. It makes this whole season worthless.
I think this whole season was a setup to put Seven in charge of the Enterprise G for a new series where she is the captain. I think that's what all of this was about. It was all to set that up, which makes me feel like Picard and the rest of the Enterprise crew, they were secondary in setting up Seven for her own series.
Well, I don't know if you have anything more to say. I've got a lot of analysis to say, but you go ahead and make sure you finish up your stuff.
Well, I have one more thing to say. I'm actually disappointed nobody died. There was no sacrifice.
There were no stakes. When they were in the Borg cube, I didn't feel at any time anybody important was going to die as far as what we cared about.
It was all a joke.
Yeah. That's why I'm saying I don't understand with the poker game at the end, why have this season other than what Molly said to set up this Titan series. They call it Enterprise G, but it's essentially the Titan. I don't know how you can just move names over to other ships. I think you mentioned this. Isn't that supposed to be bad luck if you move a name over to another ship?
I think as long as you do a proper christening ceremony, it removes the bad luck. But at the same time, I still would find that to be incredibly unlucky.
Isn't that disrespectful to Captain Shaw?
I think so.
That's his ship that he died on. I didn't like the character, but you're renaming his ship that he died on?
It should have stayed the Titan. It should have. Because, yes, like you just said, it's disrespectful to Captain Shaw. Even if I did think he was incompetent and horribly written, yeah, that's bad. That's a bad one. There were so many things wrong with this, especially since, as I said, with the lack of a proper sacrifice at the end of this season, it felt like they tried to shoehorn all these feels in there, but none of those feels seemed organic. Well, they certainly weren't things that made me feel anything. It felt manipulative. It felt very superficial. It just felt dumb.
The only feeling I had for this entire season was embarrassment.
Yeah.
I felt embarrassed for these actors.
Because a lot of this stuff rewrote what these characters used to be. They'd already messed with Picard's reasons for why he'd left the Vineyard for Starfleet in the first place. Originally, I always thought with TNG that he left because he wanted to see what was out there. And then in a previous season of Picard, they established that he left because he was running away instead of running toward, which really pissed me off. And now they've changed it again to he was looking for family, and that's why he joined Starfleet. So which one is it? It's whatever they want it to be, whichever season, whatever fits their narrative of what they want to say in that particular episode. They'll just change it. Hell, 3 seconds later, I'm sure they'll say something else because none of this is respectful to what came before. Sorry, I got a little bit angry there, but just writing like this is garbage.
You want my cold wash rag to stick on your head to calm you down?
No, that's okay. I can calm myself down. If these people want to write these stories about what they want to write, then they should write their own stuff instead of getting in somebody else's sandbox and stomping on the castle that was already there.
That leads to a longer conversation I want to have. It would be nice if I could build off what you said, Molly, but are you done?
I am finished. You go right ahead.
This week, we released a set of shorts comparing scenes from last week's episode of Picard to the mini-series of Ronald D. Moore's Battlestar Galactica. The whole point was, if you look at this as like Venn diagrams, you've got a circle that says Chief Tyrell giving Adama his old Viper and the dialogue being used in that scene. That's just one of those circles. Then you've got another circle where they talk about that they have that fleet formation thing and relating to how that was similar to Baltar's navigation program and how that disabled all the newer technology ships. That's another circle. And then a third circle where the only way that we can come into the battle and help is if we go to a museum and grab older ships. There's a third circle. Each of these circles people were treating in these videos like they were individual circles. You know, that's a common trope. That's a common thing. I can list Battleship. I can list all these other things. Fair enough, although Battleship came after Galactica, but fair enough. You might even be able to go back pre-Moore's Galactica. I set a Venn diagram. Take Circle 1, Circle 2, and Circle 3. What do they have in common, those three circles? Moore's Battlestar Galactica. There's an intersection of all three of those circles. Now, do I think they just stole from Battlestar Galactica? No, I've heard people say, well, you know, Terry Matalas and Ronald D. Moore, they worked together and they're friends, and Terry Matalas mentioned how he was so inspired by Ronald D. Moore through his career. Fine. I don't even care if Ronald D. Moore worked on this show and he was the executive producer and not Terry Matalas. If Ronald D. Moore's name was on this series, it's still derivative of Battlestar Galactica plots. Now, is it all Battlestar Galactica? No. What I'm trying to state to the viewer, and it was so bizarre, some of these people's comments, trying to explain these as common tropey things in a vacuum all by itself. When you line up all these things, not just Galactica, we could go through and I could go onto a long list of all these things they were hinting at that came in older iterations of Star Trek. And one would argue that's homage. Once or twice is homage. 100 times, 1,000 times is not homage. That's just a mashup of crap together. And people who say, you know, nothing new, everything's been done already, you can't do anything new. Maybe that's true. I don't buy that, but maybe that's true. But the English language has 26 letters in their alphabet. Who knows how many words? I'm pretty sure all the permutations of valid word strings have not been done yet. Yes, maybe you are inspired by somebody and you do your own take on it. You transform it. But you need to transform it. You can't just lift it. It reminds me of in the 90s, or maybe it was late 80s, that interview with Vanilla Ice.
Ding, 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 ding. That's the way theirs goes. Ours goes ding, 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 ding. That little bitty change. It's not the same.
Vanilla Ice was like, nah, it's just that one note, man. See, that one note transformed it. One note doesn't transform an idea. Everybody knows he stole that. I think even kids now know the legend of Vanilla Ice. So he became a pariah when it came to music. Now, coming back to this series, in this episode, I did the closest to feeling anything was at the very beginning, right before the opening Picard Star Trek letters that came on the screen. When they were on the Enterprise D, and they were pushing on the LCARS displays, behaving like they would have in TNG. I admit, I sat there and said, you know, this is a comfortable place to be, even if exposition galore was happening. But This entire series was nothing but a mashup of older ideas. And I find it interesting. I don't know what the real reasoning was, but what was the title of this episode?
The Last Generation.
You can take that two ways. The Last Generation meaning the one that came before, which would be, I guess, Picard, which I think is what Madalis meant by calling it this. Or you could read that The Last Generation meaning this is the final generation of Star Trek, which is how this feels to me. What this feels like to me watching this recycled, remashed up crap is, does anybody remember Sunset Boulevard, the film? I think Billy Wilder, I think that was the director. And the Desmond character, where she sat in a room, she was a silent film star, and she had this giant mansion, but she had the windows closed and it was dark and depressing, and she had this old projector, and she wouldn't go out much. And she would sit in that room and she would watch these old films of back when she was young. And she really didn't want to know anything about the world that was around her. That's what this feels like. They keep calling it nice things like member berries. This is Desmond inside of her mansion with the curtains closed, just waiting to die. That's what this series is. It did not give a good send-off to the Next Generation crew. It didn't even give a different send-off than All Good Things. That ended the same freaking way.
Well, it's happened before. It will happen again.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about more Galactica references that were taken, not just this season, but last season. You could even argue the first season by outlawing mechanical men. I'm not going to get into that because that will go down a rabbit hole. We could make a 2-hour video just on that. I do not understand the people. I appreciate you have all this emotion tied into this franchise. Don't you want something new? As I said in one of my comments, don't you think Picard and company deserve their own original story, their own original script? The Borg story here, we've seen this before. The poker table at the end, we've seen it before. That bridge, we definitely saw before. I do not understand. Are people really sitting in with their curtains closed just waiting to die? Are we really the last generation of Star Trek, meaning the final generation? I do not get this. I am so happy this series is done. It is done. I don't have to watch this anymore. Terry Trek sucks. We've got Strange New Worlds coming up. And that trailer we saw yesterday, or whenever it was, this week, looked like garbage. That's another one of those, the theme behind that trailer was found family. I'm not alone. Remember Uhura?
Yes.
I used to be alone, but now I've got a family. That's what this was with Jack, my found family. This is all recycled garbage. The reason you feel something is because even if you don't remember where it's from, your brain is reacting to I liked this before 20 years ago or 30 years ago, whatever they stole. You're reacting to it. I liked it back then, so I like it now. You may not even know you liked it before, like you don't even remember where it's coming from. This is just a mashup. It's nothing new. I've said this before. Give this a few weeks and try to rewatch the series. This season, I should say, season 3. It's not going to be nearly as cool as you remember it. In fact, it's going to be recycled garbage. I don't know where to go from here as Star Trek. Star Trek right now is a dead franchise. Section 31, fine. All that's going to do is put another nail in the coffin of Star Trek. The coffin's already, it's got 500 nails holding it shut, but they're going to put one more in it. I truly do not understand. And then the people who are discussing this, when you point out one specific thing and a series of things, they concentrate on the one thing. They put all their feelings into that. They explain to you how their feelings for this one scene invalidates whether it was taken from somewhere else, because that other scene you're comparing it to, that didn't have the feelings behind it like this one did. In fact, the next scene after the one that you're comparing, that was a really important scene. Well, that's not what I'm comparing. I made the mistake of engaging with people who I don't even know if they were honest actors trying to have discussions. I really don't. I think they're Desmonding in with their curtains, waiting to die. and maybe not waiting to physically die, but their soul is just waiting to die. And it is so sad. Star Trek should be the opposite of it. The great adventure out there. There should be stories on every planet you can tell. Ideas we've never thought about. Life forms we've never thought about. Ways of looking at things we've never thought about. That's what Star Trek is supposed to be. Yes, it's a mirror to our current society, but also showing where we can grow to. We don't know everything as a culture, as a species of people. We don't know everything. It is sheer effing hubris to know everything's been done before. That is the pinnacle of sheer effing hubris. I start to wonder, whatever is Star Trek now, I see this as the enemy of what Trek came before. It reminds me of, and I realize this is a software term, but that actually was my profession. It's like when you have a GitHub project and then you fork off the project because there's a disagreement in the community. I guess the Orville was the fork off of Star Trek. The only problem with that is the Orville also appears to be a dead franchise, so that is going nowhere. In my opinion, and I'm trying to be optimistic for the Trekkies who have been on board with us all season, I think there is hope here. And let me tell you where the hope is. The hope is not leveraging from inside of CBS. Terry Matalis was okay. Let's just go with him and hope he figures it out. He's not going to figure it out. He's just going to steal crap that he was inspired by. The hope is, let's try to find a franchise that can compete with Star Trek, that does it right, that does it better. The Orville was a comedy. I don't know if this is going to happen. But if one remembers the 90s, I think our great hope right now, our last best hope for new Trek, is the new Babylon 5 series. And I'm not saying you have to get into Babylon 5. There's a heated history there between Star Trek and Babylon 5. But the Orville got away with people dismissing that as competition for Star Trek because of the comedic aspect at the beginning. Babylon 5, if JMS can revive that franchise correctly, and do proper science fiction stories, that's in the same type of universe as Star Trek. And if he's able to get cutting edge 2024, 25, whenever that's going to come out, if it comes out, it will shame CBS. People will point out that this is another series made just like Star Trek, and it is shaming CBS. CBS is stuck in the past with member berries. Well, it's a reboot of Babylon 5. Yeah, I'm worried too. If JMS is just going to retell his 90s series, that's looking back. But I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to borrow elements of that, but I think he's actually going to bring it forward. That to me is our last best hope for getting Star Trek back, is an actual franchise to come out there and to just kick CBS's ass on telling philosophical science fiction stories. Because even The Expanse, the universes aren't the same. The Expanse is a dystopian universe. It's very similar to the Battlestar Galactica Ronald D. Moore universe in the sense that, yeah, there's a little bit of hope here or there, but it's a corrupt universe, I guess we'll say, with good people trying to do the right thing. So I don't know if there's any hope inside of CBS. They're talking all these series. They're talking Terry Matalis taking over. I think the best thing we can hope for as a fan base is to hope JMS is able to get his series, not on the CW, which is where it's originally pitched. I hope they pass on that and it goes to HBO Max. Because if it goes HBO Max, now there's the opportunity for JMS to take his gloves off and say, I'm going to whoop your ass, CBS, on how to do Star Trek, or at least Star Trek type stories. I've got my wash rag on my head now. I got the cold rag on there because I got worked up. And I have zero regrets for that. And I know there are lots of Trekkies out there. This past week has been some of the darkest in a long time. Not only is everybody in the PR circles praising this Matalis Trek, but we're hearing about this secret hideout Section 31 crap. Starfleet Academy we heard, a week or two ago. And now we got that Strange New Worlds trailer. It looks dark. It looks super dark. What I'm saying is I personally am hoping that Babylon 5 takes off again. And it takes off not on the CW, but on HBO Max. and I hope JMS whoops CBS's ass with adult stories moving forward. That's my hope. Optimistic, hopeful stories. And if JMS fails, I don't know where we look to. I don't see any science fiction franchises on the horizon. So I'm putting my hope in Babylon 5. And this was going to be a video I was going to make down the road, and I still might. But after watching this crap, and it is so dark and depressing right now if you're a Star Trek fan, a Trekkie. It is so dark and depressing. I wanted to leave you with something that I think we can try to hope for. We can hope another franchise starts up and shows people. These people who say everything's been done before. These people who say you gotta shoot things with no light bulbs. I'm hoping we get a franchise that kicks CBS's ass right down the street and maybe kicks it in the sewer. And maybe just by that, it'll be guilting these people to get rid of Secret Hideout because Secret Hideout is incapable of competing with quality writers. They're incapable of doing that. Member berries is all they offer. That's it. And if you want to be a Desmond and sit in your room with the curtains closed watching your old films, you go right ahead. I'm an old man and I want to look to the future. I would think anybody younger than me should be too. You got so much ahead of you. All right, Molly, I got my wash rag. You got anything to say here? Because I'm pretty much done.
I'm glad it's over. I was not enjoying watching this. This was bad. Like I said earlier in the video, I felt like the writing level was for middle schoolers, not even smart ones, because I've watched shows that were aimed at tweens that were written so much better than this. And I'm not saying that to be insulting. I mean, there really are shows out there for tweens that are written better than this. I don't understand why people are so obsessed with their feelings, why they have to watch things like this so that they can feel something.
Do they sit there and cry on their couch when they're watching this?
Some people say that they do.
And I'm not trying to be mean, but that to me is problematic if you're watching this with a Kleenex crying. There was nothing here that was emotional. I'm not saying adults can't cry. I have watched many movies that have made me cry. This is not one of them.
I cry at the drop of a hat. Commercials make me cry. Cartoons make me cry. This didn't make me cry. I think that if watching this season, if there were things in this that made you cry, I think you might need to sit and reflect on that because this really wasn't well done. I don't understand how an emotionally healthy person could watch this and be sitting there on their couch crying. I just don't. I'm glad that I don't have to watch any more of this because it grates on you after a while. Really insipid writing that is talking down to the viewer. I'm done with this. And I'm not looking forward to watching Strange New Worlds because I'm very concerned it's going to be more of the same. I think I'm just going to have to say it's dead, Jim.
Luckily, we have a break between now and their next vomit. On our channel, what we're going to do is we're going to start doing reviews/primers of the first episode of a lot of older series. This is not a, dude, you just said Sunset Boulevard and looking to the past. This is not trying to live in the past. This is trying to show good things that were in the past to show that there are more good things out there than just Star Trek. Star Trek is used to be, a wonderful franchise with lots of rich ideas. What I'm trying to show, or what we're trying to show here soon, is there are lots of Trekkies who really, they've heard about these other franchises in the past, but they never really got into them because old school television, if you didn't catch it from the beginning, you were going to get lost. So we're going to try to make some episode 1 reviews of different series, science fiction series, fantasy series, and we're going to try to spin it from a Star Trek fan point of view to see if anybody who's not familiar with these franchises, but if you're a Star Trek fan, we'll try to use the Star Trek world to kind of ease you into like the technology bases, and we'll kind of use Star Trek analogies to kind of get you ramped up. That's our goal anyway, because I think doing something positive until Strange New World starts up again, we cannot keep doing this watching horrible garbage. So we need to have some positive things here. Look forward to that, or I guess dread it if you're not wanting to watch that stuff. But we'll be back doing Star Trek stuff. when Strange New World starts up. But in the meantime, we're going to try to do something positive here and look back at the pilots of a lot of older stuff. And maybe we can get some people who've never tried these franchises before to try them and to realize, yeah, Star Trek used to be a really awesome franchise, but there are some other franchises that were pretty darn good too.
Sounds good to me. Well, what were your thoughts on this very final episode of Picard? Leave your comments in the space below. You guys know what to do. And this was just so bad, and I'm glad it's over.
Take care. Terry Trek sucks.